Okay, greetings of the day. Today we are discussing one of a very interesting book, which is After Nations, The Making and the Unmaking of a World Order. It is authored by Rana and Rana D. I am not so sure about how we can pronounce this name. If I may make a mistake, I'm sorry, but let me pronounce it as Rana Das Dasgupta. Okay, and this book is recently published, which means that it was published in 2026. And I'm here with you to discuss this book with you. And I've gone through this book. Mm. I've tried to, understand it, and the basic, whatever video will have is based upon my own understandings, okay, about this book. So this book is basically a grand historical argument about the life cycle of the nation state. That, the distinctive political unit that now governs almost every human being on earth. So, thus Gupta organizes his arguments through four thematic pillars. Then those thematic pillars are one, the God, and this is about the theology and the legitimacy, which is traced through France. Then comes the money, which is about the property and capitalism, which is traced through the Britain. And the other pillar is about the law, which is about the international legal order, which is traced through America. And the last pillar is the nature, which is about the ecology and empire traced through China. So there are four pillars of this book, which is, God, money, law, nature. God, money, law, nature. Okay, and the central projection is that the nation state is not the natural or the eternal or the inevitable form of human political organization. Rather, it is a recent invention which is barely 200 years old in its mature form. And it is, already failing. So, as you read, hold this question that what comes after the nation state? And is that, prospect frightening or liberating? So think of Brexit or the rise of supranational supranational bodies like the European Union and the WTO. These are precisely the tensions Dasgupta maps between the nation state claim to be the only legitimate political unit and the forces that have always exceeded it. So, After Nations by Rana Dasgupta was published in 2026, as I have just told you, by Penguin Random House in the US. So, let's begin. Now, let me share 10 points with you before I, get into this book. First, almost every person on earth today lives inside a nation state. But this is very new thing in the 1900s, where only 25% of people did. The second point is this, that the nation state is not natural or eternal. Rather, it is, a recent political invention that is already breaking down. The third point of this book is that this book traces four reasons the nation state was built: God, money, law, and nature. Let's talk about God first. God means, the religion that gives kings their authority. Money says, capitalism. Capitalism which needed the property law. And then comes the law where America spread a legal world order. And nature is where ecology shaped empires, especially, the China's. The fourth point for you from this book is that after World War II, nation states had a golden age. They delivered welfare, they delivered democracy, and there were rights to millions. But that era is over now, and we need to understand it. The fifth point from this book is that from the 1970s onward, financial capital escaped the government control, and the state lost their ability to manage their own economies. The sixth point from this book is that today giant corporations and private legal systems have more real power than many governments. The seventh point from this book is that the system of nation states is actually a global class system, which means that rich countries keep their privileges by militarizing the borders and trapping poor people in poor places. The eighth important topic about this, the important point about this book is about the climate change. And mass migrations are already overwhelming the system, and things will get even much worse. Das Gupta does not want to destroy the nation states. He wants to supplement them with new institutions that can handle problems too big for any single country. So his conclusion is a call for political creativity. The same way human invented the nation states when older systems failed, we need to invent something better now, which is guided by hope and not despair. So this is, 10 points that sums up this book. Now let's discuss this book a little bit more in detail. Let's start with the introduction. The nation state, a recent and a fragile invention. Das Gupta opens this book with the striking, statistic in which he said that 99.75, which almost make 100% of humanity, now lives inside a nation state. Yet in 1900s, 1900s only you can say approximately 25% did. So this is a political revolution that has happened within the living memory. The key insight is that what feels timeless and natural. Your passport, your national identity, your government is actually an extraordinary recent historical construction. Das Gupta traces the diversity of earlier political reforms, such as empires, city-states, tribal confederacies, the caliphates, the sultanates, the principalities. All of these existed for millennia. The standardization of the world into nation states under American influence, especially after 1945, was a dramatic narrowing of political possibilities. The phrase that single administrative form extended to the world's crucial problem uh, is important because Das Gupta argues that we live not in a world of many independent nations, but we live in a single, integrated political system with all the fragilities that implies. So, okay, let me give you an example. Okay, let me give you an historical analogy for you to understand it. Imagine if someone in the year 1200s told you that by 2026, every inch of the earth land would be divided into states with fixed borders, passport, national flags, and some bureaucracy, standardized bureaucracy, and that virtually no other form of political community would exist. It would sound like a science fiction. Yet that is exactly what has happened. So, what political units existed in the region you come from before the nation state was imposed? I want you to think about it because you might be coming from different cities, from different regions of Pakistan, or you might be listening it from different parts of the world. Have you ever sit and tried to look upon that what were you before a nation state? What was lost in that transition, especially? Because this is the question, this is the question, this is the question that what was lost in that transition, which actually would help you understand that what we have lost, although we have gained a lot. So the nation state has consumed our politics. This basically slide, captures the ex- uh, the existence script of the nation state. So we cannot exit it. Unlike membership of a club or a religion, citizenship is unchosen and unavoidable. So Das Gupta's phrase is that that basically you can say the freedom is, or you can say he used the word primordial freedom is provocative in nature. So he's arguing that the very system we call liberal democracy is founded on the coercive structure and you must belong to one and only one nation state. The late 1970s turn is decisive in nature for whole of this book because Das Gupta identifies the Reagan Thatcher era, which was not merely as a political shift but as a structural transformation where financial capital was liberated from state control and the nation state began to lose their ability to
direct the economic life. So the sentence that unable, even in theory, to manage reality as once it did is strong. Das Gupta is not saying states are weak in practice, but many are very powerful. But that, the theoretical model, which is that, that states as a manager of national welfare has broken down. Four pillars, the multi-century history, the multi-century history. This slide basically outlines, the book's architecture, which we have somehow, discussed before as well, because each of the four parts examine how a different dimension of the nation state, its theological legitimacy, its economic logic, its legal framework, and its ecological foundation rose and fell. The post 1945 golden era, or the golden age, was real but exceptional in nature. States in Western Europe and North America delivered unprecedented welfare, democracy, and material improvement. Decolonization gave political dignity to one third of humanity. But Das Gupta insists that this was a particular movement, not a permanent condition. The conditions that made it possible was the Keynesian economics, the capital control, and the Cold War balance of power, which eroded from the 1970s onwards. So it is clear, in fact, that the decade following the 1945 constituted an exceptional period in world's history, one that is well and truly at an end. And this is the book's central diagnosis as well. Part 1. The divider is God France. Now, part 1 argues that the modern state inherited its claim to absolute loyalty from religion, and that this claim is now in crisis because France has chosen, yeah, or you can say that France is chosen because it was the most self conscious and explicit theorizer of the secular national sovereignty. The French Revolution, the Entitlement, and the French Republic, secularism, was an attempt to transfer the divinity authority of God and Church to the nation and citizens. So the the quotation is that the quotation is that the ordering finger of God am I captures the state's pretension to ultimate authority. Das Gupta will show both how the pretension was constructed and how it is now unrevealing. The Crown of God, Chapter 1, which talks about the sacred origins of the sovereignty. So Das Gupta begins in 1238 with an act that seems utterly remote from the modern politics. The French king buying the crown of thorns. Why? Because this purchase crystallizes the central mechanism by which royal and later national authority was constructed, the transfer of divine legitimacy to political power. The captioned kings faced a practical problem. What was that problem? That how to distinguish their authority from that of the rival dukes or bishops and the popes? Their solution was theological in nature, to claim that their kingdom was not merely a territory, but a mystical body, a scared community uniquely favored by God. I hope I'm making some point. So Constantine's conversion to Christianity in 312 CE is a key. It shows that the alliance between the political power and the universal religion is very old. States have long understood that control over sacred symbols is a form of political control. The innovation of defining borders, a state with borders, as opposed to the you know, overlapping, boundaries of church and empire is one of the most important political invention in history. And Das Gupta shows it that it was a slow, contested, and deliberate concentration, a deliberate, construction, which is not a natural emergency. You want to have an example to understand it? Okay. Now, when people say that the nation must be defended, or this is an attack on Britain, they're expressing a residue of exactly this theological knowledge that the collective body of the nation is sacred and must be treated as a single unified thing. And Dasgupta shows this was invented in 13th century France. The next comes, the captions and the birth of the nation state. The caption achievement was basically threefold. One was the military, the second one was fiscal, and the third one was the ideological. When we talk about the military achievement, it was about the expanding territory. The fiscal achievement was about building a tax alliance with merchants, and the ideological, you can say, the ideological achievements was about, the